Hello there, Fresh Dreams Conference. I'm Cathy Madavan, and it is such a delight to be with you again. It just seems impossible that it was a year ago that we were together, and I was talking to you about those amazing verses from the book of Philippians where we said, forgetting what's past and the ways we've always done things before, we press on towards the goal, towards uncertainty, towards the new. Who knew that this year was going to be quite what it's been? But it is great to be with you again, and it is really exciting, I think, and timely to be thinking about this theme of going back to the future, thinking about the words from Jeremiah, those ancient paths, but knowing that we're at a junction where we have to look both backwards, but also we have to look forwards. And so I'm going to be spending a little bit of time with you at this conference, and also Mark is going to be joining me for the next session, the Digging Deeper session, on this subject of being resilient disciples who actually make resilient disciples. And it's going to be such an important topic for us in this season, I think. Resilience has, been a bit of a buzzword anyway, hasn't it? But in a year like the one we've just had, to really think about how we keep on keeping on, how we persevere, and how we not only adapt and bounce back, but actually how we look for signs of growth and strength building so that we really do become resilient, in the sense that we build capacity, we build inner strength for the journey ahead as we look past. So hopefully it's going to fit in with this theme really well, but it's also going to help us not only to build ourselves, but also to think about how we build strength in others at this time as well. Now, obviously, as we all know, storms of life are completely normal. It seems that we get thrown curveballs, well, quite regularly, certainly in this last season. Maybe that's just me. I don't think it is, though. I think it's all of us, both personally, in our families, in our churches. Storms come, and the question isn't whether they'll come. The question is how we will respond or how we will react when they do come. And I think in life, it's often that we have these blessings and battles that we are dealing with. And we think that perhaps they will be consecutive, that if we have an easy time of blessing, that then we'll be in a fit state to cope with the battles. And then once we've got through the battles, well, we'll need a rest and a time of blessing. And we kind of think it's going to be like that, mountain followed by valley, mountain followed by valley. But that's not how it works at all, I don't think. I think it's more simultaneous, that they're like twin tracks that we navigate together. And if we look on one side of our life, there might be real blessing, real encouragement. But if we look on the other side of our life, there might be a few battles going on. And it's, both of them are happening at the same time. The issue is whether we get derailed by either of them. Actually, we can become derailed by success, but we can also, or pride, but we can also be derailed by discouragement and by disappointment. In the book of Proverbs, one of my favourite Proverbs, Proverbs 13 verse 12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Such an interesting idea, isn't it? That if our hope is constantly put back, if the milestone that we're aiming towards gets removed and pulled back further, that our heart can get sick. It can actually, we can grow weary, we can grow sick in our hearts, in our spirits, because hope is deferred. So I think the question for us in a season where so much of our plans have been deferred, our expectations have been disappointed, things that we thought were certain become uncertain, and especially those of us who are leading in that space, the question is, how do our hearts not get sick, and how do we pastor and care for those who perhaps are feeling a bit heart sick in this time? And I think that's what resilience is all about. Resilience as disciples, resilience in our relationships, resilience in our ministries. It's not just about, are we able to adapt, but are we able to grow stronger and to learn important lessons through what we're going through. Now, you may not know, but resilience is a topic that Mark and I have thought a lot about, and he's going to share a lot more in the next session. We both came from, slightly challenging upbringings, I would say. There was a lot of divorce and death and difficulty. And I think that meant that when we got to our early adult life, we're both built up some resilient muscles. Some of that was positive, some of that not so much. We find our own default mechanisms, don't we? But it meant we got married young. I was only 20 when we got married, and entered married life like with resilience in one sense, but then a complete lack of resilience in how to run our relationships and how to do marriage. And like every marriage, you have your up days and your down days, don't you? But we're still going 26 years later, so a bit of resilience has been discovered there as well. And then, as many of you know, Mark is a church leader of Waypoint Church, but over those last 25 years he has lost most of his eyesight, which has given us a huge empathy for those who are dealing with chronic conditions, for those with disabilities, and for me, for those caring with those disabilities, people who maybe have a child with additional needs, or an elderly parent, or a spouse who has extra needs of one kind or another. And I think we have huge compassion on people in those situations who are often having to display the most extraordinary resilience. And they're often the people who, they're not just people who deserve our pity and our prayers. They're actually often the people we can learn the most from, because they've had to really dig deep and discover some important truths about how to keep going. Some of my favourite verses in the New Testament are from the beginning of the book of James, in James 1, where it says, "Consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters." I do think that's taking it a bit far, but anyway, "Consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything." Over the years in church leadership, we've often said if there was another pathway to maturity that we could find, we would love to find it. But it often seems that trials, suffering, challenges, ups and downs of life is what creates maturity. Maturity in relationships, maturity in faith, maturity emotionally, in all kinds of ways. It's often those struggles where we actually learn the most. None of us would volunteer for it unless we're a bit bonkers. Actually, none of us would put our hand up and say, "I would just like a few more trials because I really want to just be mature and complete." But we do want to be mature. We do want to grow stronger. We do want to not lack in anything. But most of us would prefer to sidestep the process that often leads to that. And I don't want to trivialize those trials, particularly not at the moment. But I did do quite a lot of research, particularly over this last year, just before Fresh Streams just after Fresh Streams, my new book, Irrepressible, came out, which is all about 12 principles for a courageous, resilient and fulfilling life. And I did loads of research. We're going to dig into a couple of the principles here in our next session together. But there were some things in there, just to summarize in a couple of minutes here, that we're going to unpack more, that I think are really important when we begin to think about resilience. I'm going to encourage us to think about 3 things. And the first one is this: roots. So it's about what's beneath the surface. If we're going to be resilient, we have to think about our foundations. Japanese buildings can cope with all kinds of earthquakes because of what's beneath the surface, how they've been built. And what you can't see always defines what you can see. It's always that iceberg principle. What's most important is what's most hidden, is everything beneath the surface, our roots. Where is our identity? How close to God are we? How secure are we in who we are? I love those verses in John 15, which are such a key to resilience, aren't they? Where it says, "Remain in me and I will remain in you. Apart from me, you can do nothing." That whole sense of, are we rooted? We're not focused on remaining in success or remaining in happiness or remaining in wealth. We are focused on remaining in God, knowing that He is in us. He's the treasure in our jars of clay. And when we are invested in those roots, in a deep, secure roots, that when the storms come, we've got foundations. We know who we are, we know what we value, we know what our purpose is, and we know whose we are, and that will help us to stay strong. So that we need those roots, we need to remain in Him. But secondly, we need internal strength. So resilience is partly about what is in us. So this is about our well-being, it's about our habits, about our rhythms, about our spiritual nourishment, about creating healthy boundaries, about how we're growing as a person, how we're developing. It is all about knowing ourselves, having self-awareness and growing especially in the habits and the choices that we make. And we're going to think about some principles that think about how we look after ourselves and how we make sure that internally we are growing in resilience. We're building those resilience muscles. But lastly, apart from our roots or our internal growth, we also need external structures. If you're going to grow a plant in the garden, you need trellis or some kind of support to help it grow if you want it to grow tall. And that's very true in all of the research about resilience. It's not just about gritting your teeth and trying harder. None of us have the internal resources to cope with everything that life throws at us. We're just not designed that way. We need external structures, and that could be, social services and furlough payments in this last season, or it could be friendships, community, fellowship, having a wider purpose than just ourselves, being connected to something bigger than ourselves so that we know that we are not alone. If our internal structures are our habits, then our external support is our habitat. Our habits and our habitat are both crucial if we're going to grow in resilience. And we really need to think about how we're developing strong support structures and strong internal support structures, as well as making sure we're rooted in the right thing. And so I'm just going to remind you again of that amazing proverb that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But the second half of that proverb says this, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. So hope deferred does make the heart sick, but desire fulfilled is a tree of life. Isn't it wonderful? So the question is, if we are looking to grow as resilient disciples, as resilient leaders, resilient brothers and sisters, wives, husbands, parents, whatever it is, the areas of our life that we need resilience. The question is, if we want to grow that tree of life, we need to know this. Where is our hope found? What are we placing our hope in? And what is it that we desire? If desire fulfilled is a tree of life, what is it that we really desire? Are our eyes fixed on the certainty of Jesus, where our hope will be fulfilled? Or is it fixed on the uncertainty of life, on the storms that can really uproot us so easily? And so we're going to unpack some of this in our next Digging Deeper session. Mark's going to do that with me, as I said, and we're going to really look at how we've put some of that into practice. Not that we are world experts, because resilience is all about a commitment to continual growth and to continue building those resilience muscles. We haven't got it all sorted. We are just like you. We're on the pathway, dealing with the ups and downs and doing the best we can, but we do have a real desire to come alongside you as you build resilience in whatever areas of life that you're having to grow and adapt at the moment as well. So we look forward to seeing you in that session, and it is so great to be with you as we go back to the future as Fresh Streams Conference this year. See you later.